The cops stood in front of me, hands resting on their belts. The HOA president grinned like she had already won. Neighbors peeked through curtains, waiting to see me dragged away. I was holding just one box, but inside it was the secret that would change everything, a secret so big it would flip the entire neighborhood upside down. Welcome to HOA Stories. My name is David. I'm just a regular guy in my 30s. I work in IT, and I had saved for years to buy my dream home by the lake. But the one thing I didn't plan for was the neighborhood HOA. And trust me, nothing could prepare me for what happened next. I had saved for years to buy that house by the lake, a place where the water shined every morning, where the air smelled fresh, where I thought peace would finally belong to me. But the peace ended before I even unpacked my first box. The truck pulled up, old and loud, the kind of moving truck that groaned every time it stopped. I stepped out, excited, nervous, and ready to start my new life. That's when I saw her. Across the street, standing in her bright blazer with a clipboard clutched in her hands. She didn't wave, she didn't smile. She just stared, like a hawk waiting to swoop. I carried the first box out, just a box filled with books and photo frames. Nothing strange at all, but her voice cut through the air like a siren. "You can't park that truck here." I froze, thinking maybe she was joking. Maybe this was her weird way of saying welcome. But no, her lips were tight, her eyes narrow. She looked at me like I was a criminal dropping stolen goods. "This street has rules, and you are breaking them." I laughed nervously, told her I was only unloading for a few hours. But she raised her phone, snapping pictures, clicking again and again like a paparazzi chasing a scandal. Within a minute, as she was dialing, her voice sharp. "Yes, I need officers here right away. Someone is unloading illegally." Unloading illegally. That's what she called it. Not moving in, not starting a life, not finally living a dream. No, she called it a crime. The neighbors started peeking out. Curtains moved. Shadows gathered at windows. One old man stood on his porch sipping coffee like it was a TV show. Another couple whispered behind their fence, pointing at me like I was a stray dog. My hands tightened around that box. The weight of it felt heavier than before. Though it was only paper and wood inside, I tried to keep calm. But the sound of sirens soon echoed down the quiet, perfect street. 3 police cars. Not 1, not 2, but 3. The tires crunched the pavement. The flashing lights danced across every manicured lawn, and suddenly, the whole neighborhood was alive. Doors opened. Children peeked from behind legs. It was a show. And I was the main act. The officers stepped out, belts heavy with metal, hands already resting near holsters. One of them looked at me, up and down, and then turned to her. The HOA president. Her smile was sharp, cutting. She pointed her clipboard at me like a sword. "This man is violating our rules. He's blocking the street. He's disturbing the peace." Disturbing the peace. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. But all I did was stand there, holding my own box like proof that I wasn't a thief. The officer asked for my ID. The neighbors leaned closer. I could almost hear their hearts beating, waiting for drama, waiting for cuffs. And that's when I realized something about this place. It wasn't just about rules. It wasn't just about lawns and fences. It was about control, power, and the thrill of watching someone else bow down. I handed over my ID. The officer looked at it, then back at me. The HOA president leaned in, almost salivating, like victory was seconds away. But she didn't know the truth, not yet, because I wasn't just moving in. I wasn't just another neighbor she could find for leaving a trash can out too long. No. I was something far worse for her. I was the new owner of more than one house, more than one property. In fact, I had bought the entire block, but I didn't say that yet. Not to her, not to them, not in that moment. I let the silence hang. I let the tension grow. I let the neighbors whisper, because sometimes timing is everything. The officer cleared his throat. "So you just moved in?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes, just unloading my things." Simple words, honest words. But the HOA president laughed, loud and bitter. "He's lying. Look at that truck. He's making a mess of this neighborhood. We don't allow this kind of chaos." Chaos. That's what she called it. Boxes and tape and a dream. Chaos. I almost pitied her. Almost. because the truth was about to hit her harder than any fine she had ever written. But not yet. Not in front of the whole crowd. I wanted her to sweat. I wanted her to taste her own medicine. The medicine of fear, one of the neighbors whispered. Who moves into a house this big? Another answered. Someone with money, but not enough to deal with her. They were wrong, so very wrong. I kept unloading. Slowly, box by box. Each step felt like a countdown. Each breath like a drumbeat. The officers stayed, watching. Half bored but unwilling to leave, the president didn't move. She stayed planted, arms crossed, eyes sharp. Her clipboard pressed to her chest like a shield. She was waiting for me to break, waiting for me to bow, but she didn't know. I had been waiting too, because when the right moment came, when the silence grew heavy enough, I would tell her everything, and when I did, her perfect little kingdom would crumble. Her rules, her notes, her threats, all of it would mean nothing. The neighborhood she thought she controlled, the houses she believed she ruled over. They were mine now. The officers didn't leave, they just stood there, arms crossed, like I was hiding some kind of weapon in my moving boxes. One of them asked me again, "How long will that truck be here?" I answered calmly, "A few hours at most. I just need to unload." But the president wasn't having it. She stepped closer, heels clicking against the pavement. "You don't get to decide that," she snapped. "This neighborhood has rules, and I decide what happens here." Her voice was sharp, but her smile returned. That fake smile, the kind people use when they want to destroy you politely. The officer gave me back my ID, but his eyes stayed on me. It was clear. He wasn't planning to leave until the situation was settled. I bent down to grab another box. And that's when I heard it. Fine him. Fine him right now. The president wasn't even whispering anymore. She barked the words at the officers like she owned them too. Her hand shook as she pointed at my truck. "This is against the HOA charter. Section 12, parking restrictions. He is in violation, and violators must be fined immediately." The officers glanced at each other. They weren't HOA enforcers. They were police. But she didn't care. She wanted the badge to serve her clipboard. The neighbors began to gather in small groups. Some nodded in agreement. Others shook their heads. One old man muttered, "This woman's lost her mind." But nobody said it loud enough for her to hear. I carried another box, then another. The heat of the sun pressed down on me, but the real weight came from her stare. A stare so heavy it felt like it was trying to crush me before I even stepped into my own house. And yet, I kept calm, because I had a plan. I had known about this HOA long before I bought the property. I had read their rules, their fines, their history. I knew the president by name, by reputation. She was famous for chasing neighbors out. Some sold their homes just to escape her. But me, I wasn't going anywhere. The officers sighed. One finally asked her to step back. She did, reluctantly, but her glare stayed glued to me. "Do you know who you're dealing with?" she hissed under her breath. I almost laughed, because she had no idea who she was dealing with. I walked to the porch, set the box down, and turned slowly to face her. I didn't speak, not yet. I let silence do the talking. Her lips twitched, her clipboard shook. Her perfect hair glistened in the sunlight as sweat began to bead on her forehead. She wasn't used to silence. She was used to people defending themselves, arguing, explaining, begging. But not me. I just stared, and it drove her insane. "You're going to regret this," she muttered. "You won't last a week in this neighborhood." I tilted my head, and finally spoke. "Funny thing is, this neighborhood will have to last with me." Her brows furrowed. The neighbors leaned closer. Even the cops perked up. "What do you mean?" she demanded. I didn't answer. Not fully, not yet. I only smiled. And then grabbed another box. The suspense killed her. She stormed back to her little army of HOA board members. 2 women in beige cardigans and a man with sunglasses so big they covered half his face. They huddled like generals planning a war. I could hear bits of their whispers. "He needs to be fined. We should call the county inspector. Maybe we can tow the truck." I kept unloading, one step at a time, one box at a time. Every slam of the truck door, every thud of a box on the porch. It echoed like a countdown. Finally, the sun began to dip. The officers looked bored, tired, ready to call it a night. But the HOA president wasn't done. She marched up the driveway, her board members trailing behind like loyal soldiers. She cleared her throat loudly. "Sir, we have decided to issue you an immediate violation. You must remove this truck at once, or face legal actus." I wiped sweat from my forehead, placed the last box gently on the porch, and looked her straight in the eye. "You can write all the violations you want," I said softly, "but in the end, you're just writing them on my property." She froze. "What are you talking about?" I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only she and her little board could hear. "I bought this house, and the one next to it, and the lots across the street." Their jaws dropped. The officers raised their eyebrows. The neighbors gasped so loud it sounded like thunder. But I wasn't done. I leaned in closer, almost whispering, "I don't just live here. I own here." Her face drained of color. The clipboard slipped in her hand. The board members glanced at each other, confused, terrified, because they knew what it meant. The HOA was strong, but only if they controlled the land. And now, the land was mine. I didn't gloat. I didn't shout. I just let the words sink in. The president tried to recover, her voice cracking. You can't just come in and take over." But I had already taken over. With one purchase, one set of papers signed at a lawyer's desk, her little empire was mine. I turned to the officers. "Thank you for your time, but I think this matter is over." They nodded, one even smirked. And just like that, the flashing lights disappeared into the distance. The neighbors didn't move, though. They stayed outside, whispering, staring, because everyone wanted to know what came next. The president stood frozen, her army silent behind her. She had built her power on fear, on rules, on control. But now, none of it mattered. I picked up the last empty box from the truck, carried it slowly to the porch, and with a smile, I dropped it. The sound echoed through the neighborhood like a gavel striking in court. And then I asked her the question I had been waiting for. "Tell me, how does it feel when the boss you called the cops on is me?" Her lips trembled. She had no answer. "But maybe you do. Because if you were in my shoes, standing there while your HOA president realized you owned the entire block." Her lips trembled. Her fingers clutched the clipboard so tight it looked like it might snap in half. The neighbors stood frozen, their whispers buzzing like bees around us. But she still tried to recover. That's what power-hungry people do, even when they're cornered. They pretend they aren't. "You might own houses," she muttered, her voice thin. "But I run the HOA, and the HOA runs this street." The board members nodded weakly, like puppets on invisible strings, but even they didn't sound convinced. Not after what they'd just heard. I stepped closer, calm, steady, like I had all the time in the world, and I whispered just loud enough for her to hear. "Do you really think rules can control the man who owns the land those rules sit on?" Her eyes widened, her mask cracked, and for the first time, she looked afraid. The neighbors gasped. Some even laughed quietly. The power shift was happening right in front of them, and they loved it, but she wouldn't back down completely. Not yet. Control had been her entire life, her identity, her pride. So she did the only thing left. She doubled down. "We'll fight this," she snapped. "We'll call an emergency meeting. We'll bring in lawyers. You won't win." I smiled, slow and steady. "Then call them," I said. "Bring every lawyer you want, because at the end of the day, when they check the deed, they'll see one name, mine." The words hung heavy in the air. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. The president swallowed hard. I turned my back on her and walked inside my house, leaving her standing there in silence for the first time in years. But the story didn't end that night. No, it was only beginning. The next morning, the war started. I woke up to a note taped to my door. Not one note, but 5. Each one written in bold black marker. Each one angrier than the last. Remove truck immediately or pay fine. Unapproved moving schedule violation. Mailbox too tall by half an inch. Curtains not HOA approved color. And my favorite, "Your welcome mat is non-compliant." I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. It was absurd, petty, but also desperate. She couldn't stop me legally, so she tried to bury me in paper. Fines stacked like bricks, threats folded into envelopes. But I was ready, because I had my own weapon. Compliance. I followed every ridiculous rule, word for word, but in ways so literal they broke her little empire from the inside when she fined me for the truck. I rented 10 more and parked them perfectly aligned, all within the exact hours the HOA rules allowed. When she said my mailbox was too tall, I replaced it with a shorter one, then installed 10 more decorative mailboxes across my yard because the rules didn't forbid multiples. When she complained about my curtains, I bought ones in the approved beige color, then hung 50 of them in a single front window just to prove the point. The neighbors laughed. The board panicked. The president's face turned redder every day. It was revenge by compliance, and it was beautiful. But then, things escalated. I started receiving letters, not just in my mailbox, but slipped under my door at night, handwritten ones, ugly ones. "You don't belong here. You'll regret this. Leave before it's too late." It wasn't just the president anymore, it was others too, her little army of loyalists, people who believed the HOA kept them safe. But I didn't back down. If anything, I pushed harder. I hosted cookouts on my lawn with live music, all within the legal noise limit. I parked my boat on the driveway because the rules allowed boats, just not trailers. I planted flowers on every inch of me. A yard, all approved species, but arranged into words that spelled out, HOA who. The neighborhood turned into a circus, and everyone had front row seats. One night, as I was locking my front door, I saw her across the street, the president. She stood in the dark, arms crossed, watching me. Her eyes weren't just angry anymore, they were hollow, empty, like a queen watching her castle burn. I almost felt sorry for her, almost, because beneath the blazer and clipboard, she was just a woman desperate to hold on to power in a world that didn't care anymore. I closed my door slowly, but her stare stayed with me long into the night. A week later, the emergency HOA meeting was called. Everyone was invited. Everyone showed up. It wasn't held in a boardroom. It wasn't held in an office. No, it was held on the president's front lawn. Under string lights she probably fined others for using, chairs in neat rows, a microphone stand, and the president standing tall, pretending she hadn't been losing this war for days. I walked up, calm, confident. The crowd parted like water around me. The president cleared her throat. "This man is a danger to our community," she declared. "He flaunts the rules, mocks our traditions, and threatens everything we have built." The neighbors muttered, some nodded, others frowned. Then it was my turn. I didn't need a microphone. I didn't need theatrics. I just raised my voice, steady and clear. "Everything I've done, every mailbox, every curtain, every truck has followed your rules exactly." Gasps, whispers, even laughter. "Maybe the problem isn't me," I continued. "Maybe the problem is the rules themselves." The crowd buzzed. The president's face twisted with fury, but I wasn't done. I pulled a folded piece of paper from my pocket and held it up high. "This," I said, "is the deed to every house and lot on this block." Silence, then shock, then chaos. Neighbors shouted. Some cheered, others cursed. The president staggered back. Her legs trembling, her clipboard slipped from each, her fingers crashing to the ground. For the first time, she had no power, no words, no control, only fear. And in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about everyone she had bullied for years, everyone who had paid her fines, endured her notes, lived under her thumb. And now, they were free. But freedom comes with choices. And that's where I left it. The lawn was chaos that night. People arguing, whispering, pointing fingers. The president stood pale and shaking. Her board members were silent statues behind her. And me. I just stood there holding the papers, letting everyone see the truth. The power had shifted. They felt it. I felt it. And she definitely felt it. But here's the thing about power. Once it slips, people scramble to grab it back. And she wasn't the type to surrender quietly. She bent down, picked up her clipboard, and slammed it against the microphone stand. "Everyone calm down," she shouted. Her voice cracked, but she forced it louder. "This man is bluffing. He doesn't own the block. He's lying to divide us." I almost smiled, because bluffing only works until proof is shown. I unfolded the papers slowly, deliberately. The crowd leaned in. Names, signatures, property lines, every detail printed in black and white. "This isn't a bluff," I said. "This is ownership." Gasps shot through the crowd like sparks. One man in the back shouted, "He owns my house?" Another woman covered her mouth. "I thought the Johnsons were still the landlords." The president's face turned crimson. Her fake smile returned. But this time it trembled. "Even if you do own property here, it doesn't matter. The HOA is bigger than one man." Her words floated weakly into the night air. Nobody clapped. Nobody cheered. The silence was louder than any argument she could make. I turned, walked away without saying another word, because sometimes walking away is the loudest statement of all. But the war didn't end there. It only changed shape. The next morning, I woke up to another note, not on my door this time, but pinned to my mailbox with a nail. It wasn't written in official HOA language, no rules, no legal threats, just 5 ugly words scratched in black marker. "You don't belong here." I stared at it for a long time. The morning sun lit it like a spotlight, and for the first time since moving in, I felt something cold, not anger, not frustration, but danger. This wasn't HOA pettiness anymore. This was personal. I ripped the note off, crumpled it in my fist, and walked back inside. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Days passed. The neighbors avoided me now. Some looked guilty when our eyes met. Others just shut their doors when I walked by. The president still strutted around with her clipboard. But I noticed the change. Her smile wasn't confident anymore. It was desperate, fragile. She started hosting secret meetings at her house. Cars pulled up late at night. Lights stayed on past midnight. Whispers floated through the cul-de-sac I watched from my porch. And I knew she was plotting something. Then it happened. One morning, I woke up to a pounding on my door. 3 uniformed men stood outside. Not police this time. County inspectors. They carried clipboards and official badges. Behind them, the president stood with her arms crossed. Her eyes gleamed like she had finally won. "Sir," one inspector began, "we've received multiple complaints about safety hazards on your property." I raised an eyebrow. "Safety hazards? What hazards?" They walked around, pointing at random things. My driveway had cracks. My mailbox posed a danger. Even my lawn chairs were improperly placed. It was ridiculous, obvious. She had weaponized the county itself. The inspectors scribbled notes. The president smirked behind them, and for a moment, I almost lost my cool. But then I remembered I didn't need to figure.
At her rage with rage, I had something better. Paper, proof, and patience. I pulled out my phone, recorded everything, every word, every fake violation. The inspectors looked uncomfortable. They weren't used to being filmed, but I didn't care. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about showing the world what she really was. When they left, the president leaned in. "You think you're clever, but I'll bury you in rules." I whispered back, "Rules can't bury the man who owns the ground they stand on." Her smile vanished that night. I sat on my porch thinking about everything. The cops, the fines, the notes, the inspectors. She wouldn't stop. Not until she destroyed me, or until I destroyed her. And that's when the idea came. If she wanted to fight me with rules, then I'd fight her with rules too. But not HOA rules, real rules. Laws. I contacted a lawyer, not just any lawyer, one who specialized in HOA lawsuits, the kind who knew how to cut through bylaws like scissors through paper. We met in my half-unpacked living room, boxes still stacked around us. I told him everything. Every fine, every note, every trick. He listened quietly, then leaned back and smiled. "You don't just have a case. You have the perfect case." Those words felt like oxygen after weeks of choking. A week later, letters started arriving. But this time, they weren't from the HOA. They were for the HOA. Cease and desist. Notice of harassment. Legal summons. The president's smile disappeared completely. Her late-night meetings stopped. Her army of board members began to scatter, and the neighbors started whispering again. Not about me this time, but about her, because suddenly, she wasn't the ruler, she was the defendant. The best part? I didn't have to lift a finger in anger. All I had to do was let her destroy herself with her own greed, and she was good at that. But here's the thing. The story wasn't full.
Finished, because even when she was cornered legally, she had one last move, a desperate, reckless move that could either save her power or end it forever. And that move came on a stormy night when the whole neighborhood was watching. The storm rolled in without warning. Dark clouds swallowed the lake. The wind howled through the trees like it was carrying secrets from house to house. I sat inside with the lights dimmed, sipping coffee. The boxes I still hadn't unpacked stacked around me like silent guards. It had been weeks since the HOA war began. The cops, the fines, the notes, the inspectors, and now, the lawsuit. The president hadn't been seen in days. Her porch lights stayed off, her curtains shut tight. I thought maybe she had finally given up. Maybe the fight was over. But I was wrong, so wrong that night. Just as the storm reached its peak, I heard it. The pounding on my door, not knocks. Pounds, like fists desperate to break through. I opened it slowly. And there she was, the president, soaked from the rain, hair plastered to her face, eyes wide with something between rage and madness. "You think you've won," she shouted. The thunder cracked behind her like an exclamation point. "You think owning property makes you untouchable, but you don't know what I'm capable of." I didn't move. I just let her rant, because sometimes silence hurts more than words. She stepped closer, lightning flashing across her face. "This neighborhood isn't yours. It's mine. I built it. I made it perfect, and I will never let you destroy it." Her voice cracked. Her shoulders shook. For the first time, she didn't look powerful. She looked broken. Neighbors started stepping out onto porches. Umbrellas opened. Whispers spread through the storm. Everyone was watching. Everyone was waiting. And that's when she pulled it out. A thick binder, soaked from the rain, filled with pages and pages of HOA bylaws. She raised it like a weapon. "This is my law, my kingdom, and you can't erase it." I looked at her, calm, stead. I said one sentence. "Your binder can't fight my deed." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Her face twisted. Red with rage, she lunged forward, shoving the binder against my chest. "You don't belong here," she screamed. "You never will." The binder slipped from her hands, spilling pages into the storm. The wind scattered them across lawns, rules flying like broken wings, fines spinning into puddles. The neighbors chased after them, laughing. Kids stomped on them in the mud. All those rules, all that control, reduced to wet paper scraps, and in that moment, her empire was gone. She fell to her knees in the rain. Her voice broke into sobs. "They need me. They all need me." But nobody stepped forward to help her, not one neighbor, not one board member. She was alone. I leaned down, whispered just loud enough for her to hear. "You ruled by fear, but people don't follow fear forever." She looked up at me, eyes hollow. For once, she had no comeback. The storm howled louder, drowning her silence. The next day, the HOA was finished. The board resigned. The neighbors voted. The president's title was stripped away. For the first time in years, the street felt alive. Kids rode bikes without fear of fines. Neighbors painted doors whatever colors they wanted. Lawns grew wild with flowers. And me, I just sat on my porch, sipping coffee, watching freedom bloom. But freedom has a cost, because when power disappears, people start asking a new question. Who takes its place? Some neighbors came to me. They wanted me to run the community now, to be the new leader, the new voice, the new president. I laughed at first. I didn't want to be her. I didn't want control. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized, maybe I didn't have a choice, because power doesn't just vanish, it moves. And now, all eyes were on me. Weeks passed, the storm faded, but whispers didn't. Some neighbors wanted no rules at all. Others begged for structure, and every day, letters piled up in my mailbox. Not HOA fines anymore, but requests, complaints, demands. It felt familiar, too familiar, and I wondered, was I slowly becoming the very thing I had destroyed? One evening, I saw her again, the former president. She sat on her porch, quiet, alone, no clipboard, no binder, just a glass of wine and a 1,000-yard stare. I almost walked over, almost asked if she was okay, but then I remembered every fine, every threat, every call she made against me, and I stayed on my porch because sometimes the best revenge isn't what you do, it's what you don't do. Still, I couldn't shake the question in my mind: if the HOA was gone and the neighborhood looked to me, what would I do? Would I lead them or let chaos rule the street? And maybe that's the real irony. The woman who once tried to control me had now left me with her crown. The storm passed, but its shadow stayed. The HOA was gone. The president stripped of her title. The board dissolved like sugar in rain. For the first time in years, the street was free. No more notes taped to doors. No more fines for mailbox paint. No more whispers about curtain colors or grass height. Neighbors smiled at each other again. Children played late into the evening without fear of quiet hour letters. Even the old man on the corner finally parked his RV on the street after hiding it for years. It was peace. It was freedom. It was what everyone said they wanted, but freedom has weight, and I felt it pressing on me every day. At first, people came with thank yous, cakes, cookies, handshakes. They called me the man who ended the reign of terror, the man who brought down the president. But soon, the thank yous turned into questions, then into requests, then into demands. Can you talk to my neighbor about their barking dog? Can you set a rule about trash cans? People are leaving them out too long. Maybe we should have a noise policy for weekends. I stared at them. Stu, and the HOA had just died, and already people wanted another one. At first I laughed it off. No rules, I said. That's the point. No more rules. But the requests kept coming. Knocks on my door at night, letters in my mailbox, even neighbors stopping me mid-walk with complaints. It was as if the crown I never asked for had been placed on my head anyway. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the lake glowed like fire, I found myself staring at the papers again. The deed, the proof of ownership, the thing that gave me the power I never wanted. I ran my fingers over the signatures. I thought about her, the president, how she clung to rules like lifelines, how she ruled by fear, how she built an empire of paper. And I wondered, was I becoming her without even noticing? The next week proved my fear right. It started with something small, trash bins again. One neighbor left his out for 3 days straight. Another neighbor complained, then another. Soon half the street was arguing over garbage. Voices raised, tempers flared. They turned to me. What are you going to do about it? They demanded. I froze. Why me? I never asked to be their judge, their ruler, their president. But the truth was simple, because I owned the block. They saw me as the one in charge. That night, I sat on my porch long after the streetlights buzzed on. The air was heavy, and across the street, she sat too. The former president, her wine glass glowing under the porch light, her eyes locked on me. No clipboard, no binder, but the same stare, like she was daring me to take her place. Days turned into weeks. The small problems grew bigger. Parking disputes, dogs digging up flower beds, teenagers playing music too loud at night. Each time, they came to me, and each time, I said no. But each time, it got harder. Because deep down, a voice whispered, you could fix this. You could set the rules. You could, to make it all work. That voice scared me, because it sounded like hers. One night, a group of neighbors showed up at my door. They weren't angry. They weren't yelling. They were pleading. Please, we need structure. We need someone to lead us. Just simple rules, fair rules, not like before. I looked at their faces, tired, worried, desperate, and I realized something dark about suburbia. People hate rules, but they hate chaos more. They don't want freedom. They want control, just not too much of it. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept hearing her voice in my head. The president, her speech on her lawn. This neighborhood isn't yours. It's mine. I built it. I made it perfect. I hated her words, but I understood them now. Because I had something she never had. Real power, not just a clipboard, not just paper fines, but the land itself. If I wanted to, I could rebuild the HOA. But on my terms, not out of fear, not out of pettiness, but out of justice, or at least, that's what I told myself. Then came the twist. Late one night, I heard voices outside. I looked through the blinds. A group of neighbors stood in front of my house, whispering, pointing, and in the middle of them, her, the former president. Her wine glass gone, her blazer back on, clipboard clutched tight like it had never left her hands. She was rallying them, smiling again, confident again. The queen had returned, and she wanted her throne back. The next morning, letters appeared in mailboxes, not official HOA letters, but new ones, bold, dramatic, full of promises. A better HOA, they called it, led by experience, not chaos. Her name signed at the bottom. The neighbors buzzed like bees. Some loved the idea, others hated it, and once again, the street split in two. This wasn't about grass or mailboxes anymore. It was about power. Her power, my power, and the future of the block. That night, I sat with the deed in my lap. The weight of it felt heavier than ever. I thought about burning it, selling it, walking away, but then I looked out the window, at the neighbors' gaw. There in little groups, at the whispers floating through the night, at her smile returning like poison on the wind, and I realized walking away wasn't an option anymore. This wasn't just about me. It was about everyone who had suffered under her rules, everyone who had lived in fear of her notes, everyone who thought freedom had finally come. If she took back power, everything I had fought for would vanish. And maybe the only way to stop her was to take the crown myself. The street was no longer peaceful. It was a battlefield. On one side, neighbors who wanted no rules, freedom, chaos, life without fines. On the other side, neighbors who missed the order, the control, the routine, the iron fist disguised as community standards. And in the middle, me, holding the deed that made me the true owner and holding the weight of a decision I never asked for. The president was back, not officially, not legally, but in spirit. She hosted meetings in garages, in kitchens, even in her backyard. She promised them a new HOA, not as harsh, not as cruel, but still structured, still under her control. And people believed her because people fear the unknown more than the tyrant they already know. I watched it unfold from my porch, neighbors whispering, glancing at me when they thought I wasn't looking. It was like living in the middle of a storm that hadn't decided where to strike. One night, I decided enough was enough. I called a meeting of my own. No board members, no clipboards, just me. And the truth, we gathered on my lawn. The entire block showed up. Even kids sat cross-legged in the grass, waiting. The lake shimmered in the distance. The air was heavy, and I felt every eye burn into me. I held up the deed. "This is real power," I said. "Not a clipboard, not paper fines, but ownership." Murmurs, nods, but also frowns. Then I looked at her standing in the crows. Her arms crossed, her smirk sharp. "You ruled with fear," I told her. "You made people miserable. Also, you could feel important." She didn't blink. She didn't flinch. "But here's the truth," I continued. "You're not important anymore." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Her smirk cracked. Her nails dug into her arms. But then she laughed, a slow, bitter laugh that silenced everyone. "You think you can stop me?" she said. "You think waving that deed makes you a leader? You're a fool. Because these people don't want freedom. They want rules. They crave them. Without me, they'll beg for someone else. Maybe even you." Her words hit like a knife, because deep down, I knew she was right. Already the neighbors had come to me with requests, complaints, demands. Already I had felt the temptation to control them. Already I had wondered if I was becoming her. And now, the question was in the open. Would I replace her, or would I walk away? The crowd turned restless. People shouted, some for me, some for her. It was chaos, exactly the kind of chaos she wanted. I raised my hand. The noise died down. "I don't want to be her," I said. "I don't want to fine you for grass or punish you for mailboxes. But I also know this. If we leave it to her, nothing will change." The neighbors looked back and forth between us. The air was electric, tense. She stepped forward, eyes blazing. "You're weak," she hissed. "You don't have the stomach to lead." "I do. That's why I'll win." I leaned in, close enough for only her to hear. "No. That's why you already lost." And then, I pulled out a second paper, not the deed, but something new, the lawsuit, filed, signed, stamped. I read it aloud, the words echoing across the street. Harassment, abuse of power, misuse of HOA funds. Gasps again, but louder this time. People pointed, whispered, some shouted, "I knew it!" Her face went pale. She tried to speak, but the words died in her throat. The neighbors turned on her, not all at once, but slowly, like a tide shifting, one by one. They stepped back from her side until she stood alone again, her clipboard useless, her crown shattered. She broke, right there on the lawn, tears mixed with rage. "You'll regret this," she screamed. "You'll all regret this." But nobody listened. Not this time. The storm was over and she was done. The crowd dispersed, some cheering, some silent, but all knowing one thing: her reign was finished that night. I sat on my porch again. The street was quiet, peaceful, but not the same as before, because peace is heavy when it sits on your shoulders. I looked at the deed, I looked at the lawsuit, and I realized something darker than anything before. She was right. People would always want rules, and if I didn't step up, someone else eventually would, maybe another tyrant, maybe worse than her. And so, I faced a choice. I could become the leader, not like her, not cruel, but firm, fair, balanced, or I could walk away, sell the land, leave the block to its own fate. Either way, it would change everything. I looked at the empty street, at the houses glowing in the dark, at the lake shimmering under the moon, and I asked myself the question I'll now ask you: if you had the power to destroy an HOA forever, or rebuild it under your control, which would you choose?